All characters in the story are over 18 years old. On a beautiful, sunny day with the promise of a wonderful autumn in the air, half of the trees growing along the city park were colored red, orange, and yellow, while the other half still retained their greenery. My morning went exceptionally well. On the occasion of my 30th birthday, 3 colleagues surprised me with a lunch invitation. My supervisor generously allowed me to take the remainder of the day off. I elected to take a walk after leaving the restaurant instead of returning to our unoccupied apartment. Consequently, I found myself traversing the park, which explains my presence at the. On the occasion of my 30th birthday, 3 of my colleagues surprised me with an offer to go out for lunch. My supervisor advised me to take the remainder of the day off. I decided to take a walk after I left the restaurant instead of returning to our empty apartment. That's why I found myself walking through the park, and why I was at the corner of Main and Pine. When it caught my attention, there was a bouquet of flowers in a trash can at the edge of the park. It wasn't just a bunch of almost tasteless flowers. A red rose, a yellow iris, a purple larkspur, and 4 other flowers that I couldn't identify, and they were all in the trash. I crossed the street and entered a pleasant outdoor cafe. There were 2 empty tables facing the park. I sat down at the table closest to the street, ordered a glass of red wine, and observed the people passing by. Several people stopped to examine the bouquet, and some even returned to take a closer look. I took a seat at one of the 2 empty tables facing the park. I ordered a Campari and observed the people passing by. Several people stopped to take a closer look at the flowers, although no one touched them. One lady took a picture of them on her mobile phone. I sipped my cocktail slowly, watching the man in the business suit stop, shake his head, and move on. He was a handsome young man, maybe my age, a little overweight, and around 175 centimeters tall. My mind began to wander. John Farnsworth couldn't help but be surprised at the streak of luck that had befallen him lately. 5 years after graduating from graduate school, he had worked hard at the bank for 5 years. Today he was called to the president's office and informed that the board of directors had elected him vice president. He almost started. Farnsworth was taken aback by his recent string of good luck. 5 years after graduating from graduate school, he had worked diligently at the bank for 5 years. Today he was called to the president's office and informed that the board of directors had elected him vice president. He almost started laughing, thinking it was some kind of prank, but of course Mr. Jackson never joked about such matters. It was real. Vice president. 3 months before his 29th birthday. It was supposed to be a record. In fact, according to his administrative assistant, Miss Barnes, who has worked at the bank since its founding in 1989, John left Mr. Jackson's office and made a decision. This day had come. He had been dating Michelle for 6 months. For 5 of them, they had slept together and exclusively with each other, and exchanged the words "I love you" shortly before they made love for the first time. Jane sometimes found it hard to believe that a beautiful Michelle is an intelligent and charming woman with a positive influence on John. Despite the extra time he spends in the office, she never complains. She is always ready to go out and do something at a moment's notice, and she encourages him to be the best he can be. Her support has motivated him to return to the gym. Over the past 6 months, John has lost 9 kilograms and has looked his best since high school. He plans to lose another 5 kilograms before buying new suits, as his current wardrobe makes him look a little overweight. John called Michelle at the office and asked if she was free for lunch. I have some great news. Over the past 6 months, Jan has lost 9 kilograms and has looked his best since his high school wrestling days. He planned to lose another 5 kilograms before buying new suits because he looked a little overweight in his current wardrobe. Jan called Michelle at the office and asked if she was free for lunch. I have some great news and I need to ask you a question. Aren't you going to give me a hint? No, just meet me at Sullivan's in the park. Oh, a mystery. I'm loving it and I love you, baby. See you at noon at 11:30. Jan came out of his office. Miss Barnes couldn't help but smile as Jan walked past her desk whistling a tune. It was one of his mother's. I have a question for you. Will you kindly provide me with a hint? Or perhaps you would prefer to meet at Sullivan's in the park. Oh, I see. It's a mystery. I'm enjoying it and I love you, baby. See you at noon at 11:30. John exited his office, and Miss Barnes couldn't help but smile as he walked past her desk whistling a tune. It was one of his mother's favorite Beatles songs sung by Paul. John briefly looked into the flower shop on the ground floor. He wanted a bouquet. Something special for a very special lady. With a bouquet in his hand, John floated down the street, still whistling the melody and letting his imagination run wild. What will next year bring? With a smile, John imagined what the next decade, the next 50 years might bring. His parents had recently celebrated their 35th anniversary, and were still madly in love. John could easily imagine himself and Michelle in 35 years, sharing life, love, and children. He could already see Michelle sitting at a table outside as he approached the restaurant. John could easily envision himself and Michelle in 35 years, sharing life, love, and children. As he approached the restaurant, Michelle waved at him when she saw the huge bouquet of flowers. Her smile grew even wider. "John is the sweetest, most generous man I've ever dated," Michelle said. "He always does both small and big things to make me feel loved." John walked over to the table and bent down to kiss her. Michelle reached for the bouquet. Michelle smiled broadly as she noticed the impressive bouquet of flowers. She took a sip of her white wine and waited for John to sit down at the table across from her. John, a man who was known for his generosity and thoughtfulness, approached the table and attempted to kiss Michelle, but she pulled away. He then sat down in the chair opposite her. "First of all, I would like to introduce you to the new vice president of First Bank," Michelle said, her tone formal. "Michelle, I understand immediately. Oh John, this is fantastic. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations on getting Sullivan's." John pulled his hand back and sat down in the chair across from her. "First, I would like to introduce the new vice president of First Bank." Michelle understood immediately. "Oh John, this is fantastic. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations on getting Sullivan's account. It put me in first place. Mr. Jackson said the board wanted to let him know how much they appreciated him." Michelle smiled again. "So this is my main news now. My question." The waiter chose that moment to appear at their table and asked John if he could get him something to drink. Michelle was already sipping a glass of white wine. The waiter approached their table and inquired if he could get Michelle a drink. She agreed, saying that they were celebrating a recent development in her personal life. "We're celebrating today," she told him. "My boyfriend received great news today." The waiter, who had been listening to the conversation, turned away. "We are celebrating not only my promotion," Michelle continued. Jane picked up the flowers from the table and handed them to Michelle. "We can choose a ring together later," he said. "We're celebrating today. My boyfriend received great news today," Michelle told the waiter before he turned away. "We're celebrating not only my promotion." Jane picked up the flowers from the table and handed them to Michelle. "We can choose a ring together later. Let this bouquet be a symbol of that. Michelle, will you marry me?" Seconds dragged by in an incredibly uncomfortable vacuum of silence, as John waited for Michelle's response and Michelle looked at Jen, wondering which words would cause the least harm. Finally, not knowing how to put it better, she just told him the truth. Michelle stated, "John, I don't love you that much." In less than a minute, John's world was turned upside down. Perhaps he had misheard her, but she had told him that she loved him. They had been sleeping together for the last 4 months. She had told him how happy he made her. He wondered, "What am I?" "John, I'm afraid I don't love you enough to become your wife. I would always feel that I settled down too early and didn't wait long enough for the right man. We would have been unhappy and eventually divorced. I guarantee it." The waiter brought the champagne and was about to open it. John got up. "We've changed our mind." John got up from the table. Jan pulled all the cash out of his wallet, $82, and handed it to the waiter. "It's to pay for her drinks and your tips. I suppose the champagne can be returned, since it has not been opened." "Sorry," the waiter accepted the cash and nodded, thanking us, not knowing what else to say obviously. There was a misunderstanding. John took the flowers and turned to leave. The waiter was the only one who didn't know what to say. John wondered if a simple goodbye was appropriate. He couldn't call her a fool. She had never promised him anything. He just assumed that she loved him as much as he loved her. John was on his way out of the restaurant when Michelle called out to him. "Can I keep the flowers for myself?" she asked. John crossed the street and disposed of the bouquet in the trash can. which was already filled with other people's refuse. Fast food bags, soda cans, and even a damaged umbrella that someone had thrown away after the morning downpour. Michelle, he said. Michelle called him the next day. She tried to make peace with him. Would they be able to remain friends? Would he meet her for dinner? John's response to each request was the same. I can't imagine that this will happen. Nothing will change. I will always want more from our relationship. The following day, she attempted to establish a peaceful resolution with John. Could they not continue to be friends for their own benefit? Would he meet with her for dinner one evening soon? John's response to each request was consistent. He stated that he could not imagine that this would happen, that nothing would change, and that he would always want more from their relationship than what she wanted. He felt it was better to end the relationship now before she left him for the man she really wanted to marry. After that day, they did meet several times, but only to exchange things left in each other's apartments. The city was big enough for them to live their separate lives. John and Michelle had a relationship that was not as fulfilling as they had hoped. It would be best to end it now before they both end up with other people. After that day, they did meet several times, but only to exchange things left in each other's apartments. The city is big enough for them to live their separate lives and never see each other again. One afternoon, John was sitting in a tavern when the husband of one of Michelle's girlfriends came in. John always liked this guy and he offered to buy him a beer. They started talking and eventually John had to ask. I guess I've always been afraid to ask her. Maybe you know what Michelle meant. One afternoon, John was sitting in a tavern when the husband of one of Michelle's girlfriends came in. John always liked this guy and he offered to buy him a beer. They started talking and eventually John had to ask. I guess I've always been afraid to ask her. Maybe you know what Michelle meant when she told me she would settle down if she accepted his offer. Michelle has become a victim of her preconceived ideas about Prince Charming. He paused before deciding to continue. John, you look like me. Neither of us is tall, dark-haired, or handsome. We have a solid 7 to 8 on a scale from 1 to 10. I'm lucky my wife Michelle has preconceived notions about what a partner should be like. She told me she would settle down if she accepted my offer. John, you look like me. Neither of us is tall, dark-haired, or handsome. We have a solid 7 to 8 on a scale from 1 to 10. I'm lucky my wife loves me the way I am. Find yourself a woman who doesn't pay attention to all this nonsense and loves you for the same reasons. There are many women like my Jennifer. I lost almost 9 kilograms while dating Michelle, but I will never be more than 175 centimeters tall. If it's any consolation, Michelle has told Jin several times how much I would like to express my admiration for your character and the way you love me. I would like to suggest that you find a woman who does not pay attention to these trivial matters and loves you for your positive qualities. There are many women like my Jennifer. I lost almost 9 kilograms while dating Michelle, but I will never be more than 175 centimeters tall. Michelle has told Jin several times how much she misses you. I told Jin all about your wonderful qualities, but she just couldn't get rid of the image of the perfect couple that had formed in her head. It's her loss. 5 years later, Jin saw Michelle at an open-air concert. John's wife stood next to him as they waited for his wife's body to go through the security system. Jin expressed to me that she misses you. She was aware of all the positive qualities you possess, but she was unable to dispel the image of the perfect couple that had formed in her mind. It is unfortunate that she is no longer with us. 5 years later, Jin saw Michelle at an open-air concert. John's wife was with him as they waited for his wife's body to go through the security system. She noticed that Jay was staring intently at the brunette. Do you know someone? His wife's voice seemed to shake him. Do you remember when I told you about how I once proposed and was rejected? Yes, why is that her yes? Pretty girl. Do you want to come over and say hello? No. I would feel like I was just rubbing it in. She observed that Jay was looking intently at the brunette. Do you know someone? His wife's voice seemed to shake him. Do you remember when I told you about how I once proposed and was rejected? Yes, why is that? Pretty girl. Do you want to come over and say hello? No. I would feel like I was just rubbing it in. You're rubbing what in? I'm here with you. The fact that she said no and I obviously gave up when I met you and married you. Now, most wives hearing such a remark would call it. But Jay's wife knew Jay well enough to understand that he was completely honest. He really thought he had married the most beautiful woman in the world. Rubbing his head, he reflected on the fact that his wife had known all along. She had known that he was convinced he had married the most beautiful woman in the world. Later that evening at the hotel, Jane thought about how happy he would be when he told her the news. "Jane, you're going to be a dad," the waiter said as he approached with another drink. The sun was still warm, my glass was empty, and I still had nowhere to go. "Why not?" I looked back across the street just in time to notice a very attractive lady who was doing what many others had. She thought about how happy Jane would be when she told him the news later that evening at the hotel. "Jane, you're going to be a dad." The waiter came over to ask if I wanted another drink. The sun was still warm, my glass was empty, and I still had nowhere to go. "Why not?" I looked back across the street just in time to notice a very attractive lady who was doing what many others had done before her. She looked at the bouquet and stopped before moving on. And again my imagination ran wild. Alexis Walker in North has spent the last hour wondering if she should start smoking again or not. She only quit smoking because Matt insisted that he would not marry her until she gave up this habit. So to please Matt, she decided to quit smoking with a nicotine patch. It's a pity that Alexis Walker has been contemplating whether to resume smoking, having recently attended a wedding and observed the couple's exchange of vows. She had previously ceased smoking under Matt's insistence that he would not marry her until she did so. Matt, however, has maintained his own bad habits such as flirting. While these habits may have appeared less problematic during their college years, as both were lively and cheerful, and flirting was part of the social dynamic, the transition from student life to family adulthood has brought changes. Male friends are becoming less willing to allow their wives to grow. Matt's smoking and flirting habits persisted. While these behaviors may have seemed harmless during their college days, the transition to family and adult life brought changes. Male friends were less willing to tolerate their wives' growing independence. When a young woman pressed her husband's lips against her cheek, she was met with resistance. Matt's habits remained unchanged. Matt and Alexis wed in the second year after graduating from high school, making them one of the few couples whose relationship survived post-college. However, as with many relationships, their bond was subject to challenges. Alexis was sitting in a cafe, reflecting on their journey. Alexis was fighting the urge to smoke. It would be so delicious with this cup of coffee, which is more harmful? A large pastry or a cigarette? The lawyer she hired this morning will prepare the documents for delivery to Matt in 2 days. Alexis was sitting on the patio, drinking decaf coffee, wondering if she could ask the guy at the next table for a cigarette and watching the trees across the street shake. Alexis was considering her options, which included a cigarette or a pastry. The lawyer she had hired that morning would prepare the documents for delivery to Matt in 2 days. She was sitting on the patio, drinking decaf coffee, wondering if she could ask the guy at the next table for a cigarette and watching the trees across the street shake in the rain. She could put up with flirting but not cheating. 2 years after their wedding, Alexis caught Matt for the first time. He used that little cheater from the other side of the yard. The little fool was walking around her apartment with transparent curtains as the only covering on the windows. The light was on in the room and her silhouette played. Alexis was aware that Matt was not an exceptional lover, and she had accepted his limitations. However, she was taken aback when she discovered his infidelity. 2 years after their wedding, Alexis witnessed Matt in the act with another individual. This individual, known as the Little Fool, was seen strolling around her apartment with transparent curtains as the sole form of window coverings. Despite the light being on in the room, her silhouette could be seen on the curtains. Sometimes, even during the day, she did not bother to draw the curtains as she moved about her apartment. 3 months after Dura moved into the complex, Alexis became aware of the affair. She confronted the Little Fool, who apologized and promised to stop. Over time, she began to neglect to draw the curtains even during the day. 3 months after Dura moved into the complex, she made sure that Alexis knew she was making love to Matt. Matt was too naive to realize that she had set him up. When Alexis confronted Matt face to face, he apologized to all the devils he had made promises to. He begged Alexis to forgive him and promised that it would never happen again. Bouquets of flowers were delivered to her apartment and office every week until Alexis finally gave up. However, before she did so, She insisted on being tested for diseases. Matt passed the test and came back with clean results. Alexis let Matt back into their bed. She knew the fool's game. Matt wasn't an outstanding stud in the bedroom. He couldn't be anything other than mediocre. Matt knew he had to prove his superiority by sleeping with any woman he could and then accusing his wife of infidelity. However, he was a fool and Alexis knew it. She forgave him, loved him, and even forced him to sign a prenuptial agreement. Matt knew he had dodged a bullet. It all started with the blonde moving across the yard and starting her exhibition, driving him crazy. Here Matt was being dishonest with himself again. Perhaps he lacked the capacity to resist such actions. His actions were not in alignment with the principles of integrity. His decline did not commence with this particular woman. In fact, the majority of the women he encountered provided him with reasons to feel lustful. It was simply that the blonde was more accessible than the others. The shadows on the transparent curtains initially captured his attention a week after she moved in. Matt almost communicated something to Alexis as he sat on their back porch, but he refrained from speaking. The next day, he was in the store purchasing the highest quality binoculars. He began to allocate more time on the veranda, observing and waiting for a specific occurrence. The blonde would enter through the window, and if he was able to do so undetected, for example, if Alexis was occupied in the office, he would enter the premises and observe her from one of the darkened rooms. He was watching her through binoculars. It was as if he was a trout caught on a barbed hook. Despite her best efforts, Matt was dead. It took the blonde 3 attempts to catch Alexis with her husband. The blonde almost gave up after the second attempt in her bedroom. She wondered how the woman had managed to endure it the first time. The first attempt was bad enough. Why did she hate Alexis from the moment she first saw her? She harbored a strong dislike for her. Alexis was in possession of a slender physique and long toned legs, not to mention her commitment to an excellent diet and regular jogging of 30 to 40 kilometers weekly, in addition to her frequent swimming laps. Alexis had cultivated a substantial network of acquaintances, a testament to her determination to overcome her innate shyness and inclination to be an introvert. Alexis was a highly accomplished individual who had worked hard to overcome her shyness and introverted tendencies. She had a slim body and long, toned legs, and she exercised regularly, running 30 to 40 kilometers a week and swimming frequently. Her hard work and dedication to her appearance had attracted many friends. In their third session, Matt expressed his feelings about being lucky to have married her. In a spontaneous moment, Alexis decided to use Matt's own words against him, which led to their discovery of his infidelity. In their third session, Matt repeatedly emphasized his good fortune in marrying Alexis, a strategy that ultimately proved effective. However, Alexis discovered Matt's infidelity and chose to forgive and reconcile with him, a decision that Matt eventually reciprocated. Matt's return to the apartment after 2 weeks, and their subsequent reconciliation, following more than a month of physical separation, were significant milestones. Over the subsequent year, Matt made concerted efforts to win Alexis's forgiveness and demonstrate his commitment to change. Despite these efforts, Alexis found herself unexpectedly pregnant a little over a year later. The subsequent discovery of Matt's infidelity was particularly distressing for Alexis, primarily due to the method of discovery. Matt was playing golf when the doorbell rang. After opening the door, he saw a young girl standing in front of him. "Are you Alexis?" he asked. "Yes," the girl replied. "I was waiting for the girl to ask if she wanted to buy cookies for the Girl Scouts, but why would this young girl know my name? Can I talk to you? Please go on. It's kind of personal. May I come in?" Alexis looked behind her. She had heard about fraud when some thug follows a girl. She didn't see anyone and she unlocked the door. She blocked the door as soon as the girl crossed the threshold. "How can I help you?" The young woman inhaled deeply. "You can let Matthew go. Grant him a divorce." Alexis almost lost her composure and spoke barely above a whisper. "Excuse me, why don't you let Matthew go? If you truly loved him, you would want him to be happy and move on. I will make him happy." If Alexis had watched this scene in a light-hearted romantic series, it might have seemed implausible and amusing. However, this was her reality, not a fictional narrative. A cauldron of intense emotions was brewing within Alexis, but she needed answers. She maintained her composure, despite the internal turmoil. Alexis couldn't resist asking, "How old are you?" The girl appeared to be the subject of a question, but your response was not audible. Alexis calculated that you would be 19 next month, but did not state her belief aloud. It would have been preferable for you to be 1 year older, as that would have enabled her to initiate legal action. Alexis recognized the need to maintain the flow of the conversation and activated her phone's voice recorder. Alexis, who was keen to maintain the conversation, almost inquired if the girl would like a glass of wine, but then remembered that she was too young to drink. "Can I get you a Coke?" she asked Lacey, her name. Alexis felt that everything was going well. She had expected to see a hysterical vixen, judging by the way Matt had described her. Instead, Lacey offered her a Coke. Alexis returned to the room with a Coke for Lacey and a glass of wine for herself. 20 minutes later, Alexis's patience snapped. Lacey left, and on Alexis's phone there were messages from Lacey Brown where they met. "Lacey works at Triers, a local Hooters. Fake. How long has this been going on?" 2 months had passed since the affair between Lacey and Matt had begun, and Alexis had recorded their encounters on a dictaphone. When Lacey and Matt made love, Alexis had felt elated. However, her patience was eventually exhausted. Lacey left, and on Alexis's phone, there were messages from Lacey Brown and inquiries about where they had met. Lacey works at Triers, a local Hooters. After arriving at her sister Haley's residence, Alexis immediately fainted and sobbed uncontrollably for the following hour. Haley was visibly distressed as Alexis's shoulders shook uncontrollably, recounting the transgressions of Matt. Haley had never been informed of the first woman. Upon arriving at Haley's residence, Alexis immediately lost consciousness and began to weep, continuing for the subsequent hour. Haley experienced a profound sense of dismay as Alexis's shoulders trembled uncontrollably, recounting the transgressions of Matt. Haley had been unaware of the initial incident, and above all, she wished for Matt to confront her sister. She was eager to confront him for his actions against her younger sibling. On Sunday, Haley contacted a friend who had recently undergone a divorce. By Monday morning, Alexis had scheduled a meeting with her legal counsel for Wednesday. Following their meeting on Sunday, Alexis's sister called a friend who had recently divorced. By Monday morning, Alexis had an appointment with her lawyer for Wednesday. After their meeting with the lawyer, she was optimistic that everything would happen after the divorce and that Matt would be handed the documents on Friday. Alexis finished her cup of coffee and was ready to go home. It was time to pack a few more things from home when she looked up and saw Matt standing with a large bouquet of flowers. "Come home, Alexis." "I'm sorry, so sorry," Matt said. Alexis left the cafe and crossed the street. Matt followed her. "What can I do to make amends?" Alexis stopped and reached for the bouquet. Matt was stunned, thinking to himself, "Can it really be that simple? Maybe she really loves me." Alexis took the flowers, sniffed the bouquet, and threw it in the trash. "Then you and little Miss Tiny Boar can discover your love together. You can take her to the last boy band concert and have a Coke together." Alexis took a deep breath. "You make me sick, Alexis." She entered a taxi and directed the driver to the garage, where her car was parked. She provided the driver with a generous tip for the short ride. Upon returning home, Alexis changed into her workout attire and ran a few kilometers. By the time she arrived at her sister's residence, her sister and brother-in-law had returned. Alexis returned home, greeted by her sister and brother-in-law Kyle. She informed them about her meeting with the lawyer, the public dispute with Matt, and that he would receive the divorce papers on Friday. Her brother-in-law, noticing this, interrupted her. "Wait a minute. Did Matt meet you at the flower shop? How did he know where to find you? I've never thought about that. Let me see your phone." Alexis informed her in-laws about the meeting with the lawyer, the public quarrel with Matt, and that he would be handed the divorce papers on Friday. Her brother-in-law noticed this and interrupted her. "Wait a minute. Did Matt meet you at the flower shop? How did he know where to find you? My God, I've never thought about it. Let me see your phone." Alexis's brother-in-law pressed a few buttons on her phone. "Did you know that you have a tracking app on your phone? I didn't install it there." "Matt probably did, probably to make sure you weren't following him when he met his teenage girlfriend, or maybe to keep track of whether you did to him the same way he did to you. That's the problem with cheaters. If you can't be sure of your loyalty, how can you trust your soulmate?" While they were talking, C was busy with Alexis' phone. Everything is deleted. Matt was served on Friday. He contacted Alexis at least every other day, apologized, and pledged to be faithful until the end of their relationship. Alexis did not acquiesce a second time, and 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. However, not before Matt's lawyer requested, and the judge ordered 3 sessions of psychological counseling for the couple. The sessions were beneficial for Alexis. She discovered that Matt's serial infidelity was not her fault. It stemmed from his lack of self. Matt's character, shaped by childhood bullying, was a factor in his infidelity. However, Alexis's lack of love for him was not the primary cause. The couple underwent 3 sessions of psychological counseling, which were beneficial for Alexis. She learned that Matt's adultery was driven more by his lack of self-respect than by her own lack of love. Matt's character, shaped by childhood bullying, was a contributing factor to his infidelity. However, Alexis's lack of love for him was not the primary cause. The couple underwent 3 sessions of psychological counseling, which were beneficial for Alexis. She learned that Matt's adultery was driven more by his lack of self-respect than by her own lack of love. Matt's character, shaped by childhood bullying, was a contributing factor to his infidelity. However, Alexis's lack of love for him was not the primary cause. The couple underwent 3 sessions of psychological counseling, which were beneficial for Alexis. She learned that Matt's adultery was driven more by his lack of self-respect than by her own lack of love. Matt's subsequent actions led to the fulfillment of prophecy, resulting in his ongoing marriage to Alexis, contingent on his belief in her. A year later, 6 months after the finalization of her divorce, Alexis refrained from smoking that first cigarette. One afternoon, Alexis's sister extended an invitation to her for dinner on Saturday night. She was attired in comfortable yet elegant clothing. "I have a colleague at the bank who is named John. I believe you would find him to be a suitable match for you. He is a unique individual, possessing intelligence, success, and a healthy self-assurance. It appears to be the male equivalent of an outstanding personality." Alexis expressed amusement at this prospect. Upon receiving the invitation to the dinner party, Alexis accepted John's invitation to attend the show and dinner the following weekend. She arrived in a navy dress and 10 centimeters heels. Upon entering the residence, John was met with Alexis's striking blue eyes. "You look stunning," he remarked. Alexis accepted the bouquet in one hand, playfully adjusting Jen's lapel with the other, and added, "You look very professional as well." John felt slightly self-conscious as Alexis departed for the kitchen, noting the impressive length of her legs. John found himself slightly taken aback as he watched Alexis, who was dressed in a tight, blue dress that accentuated her figure. John offered his assistance in putting on Alexis's coat, and she accepted. John was surprised by her question, and he wondered if he had time to return the theater tickets he had purchased. Perhaps she was trying to cancel their date. John felt a sense of regret. John accepted the invitation, now that she was standing next to him. "No, I like to look into your eyes that way. Would it be a problem if you were accompanied by a guy my height?" "Look, I'm sorry. Last month I was dating a guy about your height, and he asked me to wear ballet flats. I didn't even think about it until you came." John laughed, though he wondered if that made her even more uncomfortable. "To the door, I just didn't want to seem like I suck at dating. Ask my sister, she'll tell you." "I understand, but this is all too ridiculous. Okay, can we start over?" "Yes, please let me go, or we'll all be late." John took her hand and led her to his car, holding it open. "I like to look into your eyes that way. Would it be a problem if you were accompanied by a guy my height?" "Look, I'm sorry. Last month I was dating a guy about your height, and he asked me to wear ballet flats. I didn't even think about it until you came to the door. I just didn't want to seem like I suck at dating." John opened the door for her and guided her to his vehicle. He then proceeded downtown, glancing back at Alexis. "Do you have a problem with dating someone my height, especially someone who appreciates the way your feet look in those heels?" John asked. Alexis understood why her sister was so eager to set her up with this man. He was direct and confident but not arrogant. "My ex." John proceeded to the city center, reflecting on his conversation with Alexis. "Do you have a problem with dating someone of my stature, particularly one who finds the sight of your feet in high heels appealing? Alexis recognized the motivation behind her sister's eagerness to introduce her to this individual. John was straightforward and self-assured, devoid of arrogance. My former spouse, however, was a dishonest and unfaithful individual. How much are you wearing? 180 centimeters? You appear to be a commendable individual. I am a commendable individual, but for 180 centimeters, I'll have to decline. John replied in jest, but it proved insufficient for my previous significant relationship. She required more height. Well, she appears to be just as foolish as my former spouse. Perhaps we should introduce them to each other, but only after we have castrated them, so they cannot procreate. There are sufficient unintelligent individuals in the world. John was already beginning to find her appealing. Following the performance, John informed a woman at the dinner gathering about the unfortunate circumstance of his failed marriage proposal. Alexis, John's acquaintance, took the opportunity to gently restrain his hand in a gesture of reassurance. It is regrettable, but at least the matter came to light before the nuptials. After a 3-year partnership, it became evident that John, despite his outward confidence, was actually a timid individual who required frequent validation of his self-worth. Following his second indiscretion, I concluded that it would be prudent to bring the relationship to a close. After the show, John told Alexis about his failed marriage proposal. Alexis reached out and squeezed John's hand. It's unfortunate, but at least you found out about it before walking down the aisle. After 3 years of our relationship, I realized that behind all his bravado was a scared little boy who needed constant confirmation of his worth. After his second indiscretion, I realized it was time to cut my losses. So here I am, 24, divorced. I've dated 4 men since the divorce, and I'm socially awkward. I almost ruined the best date of my life with my stupid comment about my heels. Will you ever be able to forgive me? Now it was John's turn to reach out and take Alexis's hand. It was hard for him to believe that this gorgeous woman with such a kind heart was asking for his forgiveness. Alexis looked across the table and somehow knew this was the man I was going to marry. We had planned to have children and grow old together. It was the beginning of a great relationship. 7 months later, on a warm spring night, Jan asked Alexis to marry him. Alexis wrapped her arms around John's neck and said yes, before kissing him passionately. 2 months later, a district judge married Alexis North to John Farnsworth in a ceremony on the lawn behind his parents' house. They had children, and since then they have lived happily. After 7 months of courtship, Jan and Alexis were prepared to embark on their shared journey of matrimony. On a balmy spring evening, Alexis accepted John's proposal, and the two shared a passionate kiss. 2 months later, Alexis and John formalized their union in a ceremony presided over by a district judge at the parents' residence. The couple subsequently had children, and has enjoyed a harmonious relationship ever since. Subsequently, Alexis received a call from her husband, John, who was in the company of his infant daughter, Katie. He inquired about Alexis's location, expressing his desire to meet with her. While Sullivan was having a drink and engaging in conversation across the park, Alexis called his office to inform him of her early return home. Sullivan informed her that he had left after lunch and had decided to return home to surprise her. The plan was to have a light evening, including cocktails and dinner, followed by an early bedtime. Anthony. I was interrupted by the ringing of my phone. Looking up, I saw that it was my husband calling his baby, Katie. He inquired about my location, telling me that he was sitting with Sullivan across from the park, drinking and thinking. I asked where he was, and he replied that he had come home early. I called your office and they informed me that you had left after lunch. I decided to come home and surprise you. We could have an early cocktail, then an early dinner, and then perhaps go to bed early. Anthony, are you trying to get into my panties? This thought occurred to me today, which is your birthday. I wanted to give you something special, something like what you gave me last night and the night before last. No, it's really special. I bought some magic pills that were advertised on late-night television. Anthony said the words with difficulty before bursting into laughter at his own joke. God, I love this man, his sense of humor, and the way he always thinks of me first. What did I had the idea that you might be interested in a special gift for your birthday? I thought about the special things you gave me last night and the night before last, and I decided to get you something similar. I bought some magic pills that were advertised on late-night television. Anthony said the words with difficulty before bursting into laughter at his own joke. I love this man, his sense of humor, and the way he always thinks of me first. When he hugs me, it feels like it's time to give him the one thing he's wanted for the past year. He interrupted my train of thought. What do you do besides drink? You know me, hubby. I let my imagination run wild. When are you going to write down any of these stories and let me read them? What? Tell my husband that he married a pervert? Why not? That way I'll know that we're meant for each other too. We're hopelessly in love. Perverts go home and I'll prove it to you. I will settle my bill. I'm ahead of you by a couple of Negrin cocktails. Have a drink and I'll be home in 20 minutes. Order dinner, we'll undress and feed each other pad thai and spring rolls. Knowing that my husband was waiting for me, I decided to spend money by taking a taxi instead of a bus. While I was waiting for the taxi to arrive, I called my gynecologist's office to make an appointment to remove the intrauterine device. With any luck, Anthony will be a father by this time next year.